those of you that have been able to do the meditations that we've been working with, a bit of, getting a little bit clearer on the qualities you're looking for, the advantages and disadvantages, and then talking about more specifically those 4 main reasons of how to see the guru as the Buddha, which again brings us a little bit more into a tantric level, but it's okay if you have not had tantric initiation. It's okay, it just starts to get your mind to see purely, is what we're really trying to do, to see things more purely. What seems to happen in our cultures, and I know our cultures are still different, but they do share some things in common. Think about it. Are you from a culture, it could be your family, your community, schools, universities, where we were taught a little bit we are certainly taught to be discerning in Buddhism. It's very important. Check up and investigate thoroughly, very healthy approach. And Buddhism really, this type of Buddhism really asks you to do that. So that's a very important part, especially when we're dealing with a course about the spiritual teacher. But also, how often have we been known to pull things apart in a negative way? Is that sort of something you're used to, being overly critical or judgmental? And when that happens for me, I want to keep going back to, am I seeing things accurately? So let me just ask, just opening up as people are popping on, have you noticed anything around that coming up, or any particular questions you might have now, or concerns that in these 3 weeks that we've had from the materials, is there anything right now that's kind of bubbling up? Yes, Wendy.
Thank you very much. Bubbling up. I guess I feel like I've read some of this work before, and I think I might have taken this course before, but I think I'm seeing things in a way of seeing the guru as the Buddha as maybe being more like thought transformation, and so meaning that being able to kind of see the virtues and the positive qualities of that being in front of me. And I'm just curious about the discerning, like, am I supposed to see, like, is the practice of doing that, I think it's an amazing practice, because imagine if you could see everything like that, if you could see everything that was negative, non-virtuous, whatever, it positively, right? If you could have that skill, I want that skill. But then, so what happens if my anxiety or my fear is actually information that I should be listening to? Do you know what I'm saying? So I guess kind of that's where I'm at, and I know that that's probably what you're going to get into today. But yeah, thank you so much. I've been thinking a lot and meditating a lot on this. Thank you.
Sure, no, that's a great question to ask. And I wanted to mention, I use terminology, I try to get more specific. And I think, especially when we talk about emptiness or things like that, and this course is not about emptiness per se, but to be distinct with our terms. So when you said thought transformation, I think you used those 2 words. I'm being more specific. Thought transformation for me are teachings on Lojong. And that's a very specific other type of teaching that's not about.
Okay, yeah, yes. No, I understand. I guess that's the word that I kept on thinking about when I was meditating on it. I'm like, is this kind of that practice? Okay, so thank you for clarifying that to me.
What I would say is absolutely what we are trying to do from those 4 reasons is you're transforming your mind from an ordinary view into something a little bit more extraordinary. And that's really what we're ultimately getting into with Tantra and generation and completion stages of that. That's another course. I'm actually leading that course this coming weekend for our center in New York, and you can register for it. And I think even for English time, it would fit into your time because it's daytimes, it's morning and afternoon. So there's one Friday night session that's an intro, that doesn't matter. But if you're interested, it's Saturday and Sunday morning. I think it's like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. And that's an intro to Tantra that'll talk about how are we fine tuning that view and what's the purpose of that and why is Tantra the fastest and how do I get a Tantric initiation and what's that about? So with the guru and the spiritual teacher ideas, we are trying to work our way towards that. And that's why this is a pivotal place of having that qualified guide to do it. So you're right. Yeah, there is a thing. And so what I'd like to do, and let me see, are there any other bubbles? And we are going to address some of this. Any other things that have come up for you in this course? Anything you're thoroughly confused with or not in agreement with or struggling with? Okay, everybody looks, okay. What I'd like to do a meditation just slowly on those 4 reasonings, a little bit touching on particularly a couple of those. Again, how you would meditate, how you would do analytical meditation, because people always ask me this, how do I really meditate? So let's sit comfortably now that we're all here. And I also want us, again, the most important part of this is reorienting our motivation. You've already had a good portion of your day. So it's about like, how's the day been going for you? And this is something really helpful in quarantine. Of course, helpful at any time in our lives, but is I keep bringing up over and over, why am I going to the kitchen now to eat? Can I make that a little loftier motivation than just I'm hungry? Can I think about nourishing my body? Why? Because I would really like to practice Dharma with energy and health. And why do I want to do that? So I can get enlightened. Why do I want to do that? To benefit every living being. So that's why I'm going to have something to eat now. That's why I'm going to have my tea now. That's why I'm going to walk to the market right now. But so it's just transforming those ordinary experiences, ordinary everyday experience into a little bit better directing it with that motivation. And again, when you set that motivation, when you reestablish the motivation, you are directing your awareness. And look at what happens to your awareness all day long. Isn't it pulled off in different directions, out of your control? You'd like to be focused on this, but now you're over here. And then people that spend a lot of time on technology, it's the internet, I find there's some great benefits to it. But again, think about it. It basically concentrates you into a little area, and it could be your little screen, whatever it is, okay, only to thoroughly spew that all over into a million different directions. You see people, oh, this popped up and this ad, and now I need these shoes and that bag and this thing. And so we're so distracted. We're so distracted. And I do find a culture in the UK, especially with some older folks that I know, friends of mine, a little less, they're a little prone to less distraction because they're not on the devices as much. They know how to limit it. They know how to go and walk out in nature, as I'm sure many of you do. It's much more that culture, I'd say, than what happens in the States. And if any of you are familiar, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, there's a new video, and I don't watch a lot of TV or videos, but occasionally somebody will send me a link and say, you ought to watch this. So if I decide to take a break and watch something, I want to make sure I'm watching. I keep a little list of what people have said is worthwhile, and then I just go to that, okay? So did we talk about last week the social dilemma? Have you heard of this video? I think I mentioned it, okay. I watched it. It's mildly terrifying, okay? It's like the new horror film. My niece at 29 years old, I think I mentioned, said she hasn't gotten up the nerve to watch it yet. It's just a movie about technology. But I did find it interesting. And as a result of it, just limiting more and more social media, getting all of your notifications to stop, silencing your phone more, shutting off the phone more, getting what, just really limiting that. And this is a lovely season for us, the autumn as well, where we've been very fortunate. We've had summer and autumn to be able to go out and walk. And I think in England, you can have a milder winter than we sometimes have where I'm living. Um, so it can still rain a lot, I know, and get cold, but you can still go out on walks and just dress accordingly. And I walk sometimes in the winter as well and go out anyway. And I think it's essential for us to kind of do that. So let's just sit comfortably, find that comfortable meditation posture. And you want to check that your spine is as extended as possible. So as if your back is straight in a chair or cross-legged, whatever can hold that posture. And lightly close your eyes. And just allow your respiration to deepen. Every inhalation bringing in space to any tense places in your body, opening up the space. And every exhalation, imagine releasing the tension as much as possible. Checking in with your motivation now, and as best as you can, orienting your mind in a most positive direction. And if it's possible to include the idea of directing yourselves as quickly as possible to full enlightenment. But why? For the purpose of benefiting every single sentient being, every living being. And if we can find a spiritual teacher, and if we've already found one or more, is it possible to see them as a Buddha, to see them in this enlightened form, or to just have some knowledge and feeling and to behave with them, serving them with our thoughts that they're a Buddha? This is how we serve in thought. There's two ways we serve, in thought and in action. So in thought, number one reason, consider please, Vajradhara stated that the Guru is Buddha. Vajradhara, the primordial, and they'd say Buddha Vajradhara, who's inseparable from that omniscient consciousness. Turn it around in your mind. An omniscient consciousness means all knowing. It's not something we're used to being around, an all knowing consciousness. But think about if you're around a being that is all knowing, that knows everything. And they say that in degenerate times, which people and the scriptures point to this period we are living in, that during degenerate times, the Buddha would appear, okay, would appear among us, Sometimes there's Christian teachings that say Jesus will walk among us. Will we recognize them? Are we attuned right now to recognize deeply spiritual goodness when it shows its face to you? So Buddha Vajradhara said in these degenerate times, he would appear among us in the form of spiritual friends, in the form of virtuous friends. That's what we discuss, the meaning on one level of guru, lama, like that. And that we could meet and recognize him. That we could meet and recognize him. So just feel, can I develop the faith? Think in your mind, can I develop full faith? Can I generate a little bit more faith now if I don't have much faith? That amongst our spiritual guides, amongst our teachers, there must be at least one emanation of Vajradhara. One emanation that is the Buddha. Consider this more deeply. And also reflecting on this scriptural reference. During the last 500-year period, I will manifest as a teacher. You must recognize that I am this one, and then generate reverence toward him. Again, focusing more deeply on what I was saying, on those lines, on the explanation, turning it over and over from every angle in your mind. Letting it sink from intellectual knowledge and understanding to more of a spiritual experience. And again, because Buddha Vajradhara stated this and saw this because he was omniscient, that he would manifest as a teacher in a form we can see. So just think, amongst all your teachers, one of them could be a Buddha. One of them has to be a Buddha. Because he said this is the form he'd come back in. Can we recognize him? Can we at least generate an idea that maybe one of them, amongst these different teachers I've met, is a Buddha? If I deny it in my mind and say it's not possible, it won't be possible to see them that way. Could it be possible that one of them amongst these teachers during this degenerate time period could be a Buddha? Vajradhara saw it like that. Let's consider the second reason. The Guru is the agent of all the Buddha's good works. Think about the proof of this, that the Guru is the agent of all the Buddha's good works. So think about a magnifying glass reflecting the sun on a piece of wood. Think about the sun, the strength of the sun's rays. When the strength of the sun's rays hits any type of wood outside, any type of wood anywhere, okay, it makes the wood warm, but it doesn't have the power to ignite it generally. Doesn't have the power to ignite it generally, or many things would be catching on fire, right? But when you take the magnifying glass, magnifies, illuminates the teachings in us. That fire of enthusiastic perseverance can generate in us. The teachings burn through into us. The magnifying glass, that's the Guru. That is the role of the Guru. Just think about that more deeply. Are we absorbing the teachings directly from the Buddha? Most of us don't have the karma to see enlightened beings around us. They say Lama Tsongkhapa took teachings directly from the Buddha of infinite wisdom, Manjushri. Can you get teachings like that directly from the Buddha of infinite wisdom? Most of us don't have that pure karma. We need a magnifying lens to have it synthesized through that. That's the role of the Guru. And think about the various aspects the Guru manifests as this agent of the Buddha's good works. Think of the various aspects, all the different teachers you may know, the different ways they manifest to touch different students. Just as they say in the scriptures, as a single moon in the sky appears as separate reflections on the surface of water, standing in different containers. The exalted wisdom of the minds of all the Buddhas, that exalted wisdom of bliss and emptiness, appears in various aspects to subdue different disciples. So reflect for a moment on the different teachers you've been exposed to. How each one in some way has radiated some of that wisdom through to you. And because of our good fortune, the Buddhas appear to us in the aspect of spiritual masters. If they appeared in a lower form, like the maggot-infested dog with a sangha, we wouldn't acknowledge them as anyone to learn from. That's how we generally interact with something of a lower form. We're not able to see them as infinite Buddhas, also in the higher form. Okay? So our spiritual guides, our teachers, our gurus are skillful emanations of the Buddhas, created just to subdue us, just to help us transform our minds. Think of that skillful means they use to appear as they do in a form we can connect with. The guru is the agent of all the Buddha's good works because they help you perform positive actions. They encourage you to merge your mind and soak your mind as much as you can with more virtuous behavior. That's the influence a qualified guru can have. And since the Buddhas do not need to depend on ordinary beings like ourselves to accomplish their work, they must be Buddhas. They must know all that they're doing. They must be merged with that enlightened consciousness. Let's look at reason number 3. The Buddhas unmistakably know the situation of all beings and love us no matter what. That's their job. That's who they are on this path. They always work to help us. That's all they're doing. That's their purpose. Okay? So they must be working for us now. This third reason is Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are working for all living beings. This is their purpose. They don't stop suddenly, I want a holiday, I'm going to Hawaii. I think I'll stop taking care of others now. So they develop bodhicitta. The Buddhas have developed bodhicitta solely for the sake of benefiting us, benefiting living beings. They practice the path just for that reason, for our sake. They became enlightened just for our sake. So now that they're enlightened, of course they're working for us. It never ceases their activities. Of course they're working for us. Think about that deeply. And since they can't transfer their realizations to us, because they would if they could, okay, they help us by teaching the path to enlightenment. They help us by teaching the path to enlightenment. Who is doing this now? Our present gurus. That's who's doing that now. That's who's teaching us the whole path to enlightenment. So they must be Buddhas. Reason number 4, we cannot be sure of appearances. Think about your perspective and your view. Have you ever been wrong when you get a story going about someone? So just because your teacher, your guru, appears as ordinary, does it mean that they are? Think about how you perceive things at times, that sometimes you've made mistakes. You got the story wrong. Doesn't your perception depend on your karma and the level of purity of that? Purity of your mind? So it's the same thing if you have a Buddha statue in your garden on the ground, which Lama Zopa Rinpoche doesn't like, it's too low. Put it on a platform, but if it's on the ground, and I've seen this myself, I've seen a dog come up and urinate on it. That's the dog's level of consciousness. Think about your level of consciousness as a human who's met the Dharma. You certainly recognize the Buddha statue, but you definitely don't see a Buddha there all the time, a living, breathing Buddha. If we have this level of limitation, maybe our perceptions are fallible. Not seeing everything absolutely perfectly. Could that be the case? So we don't see our gurus as Buddhas simply because we don't have the special valid cognition to see them in that way. Just consider that more deeply. So when you've attained this realization of guru devotion from these 4 reasons, you become convinced that those above 4 reasons prove the spiritual guide to be a Buddha, and you experience a kind of mingling of the guru with all the Buddhas in your mind. So please relax, and when you're ready, slowly open your eyes and just notice any thoughts or feelings that arise. So I'd like to talk about a little bit more in thought, devoting in thought, is seeing the kindness of the guru. And I wanted to mention that meditation with the 4 reasons of how to see the guru as Buddha is a very profound part of the spiritual teacher teachings. It's really the essence of what you meditate on if you're trying to develop a realization, an experiential realization of guru devotion. So you don't just do the meditations once. That's the tricky part for Westerners. We get a bit bored and you want to sink down into it over and over. If you're able to do a little bit, like 20 minutes a day, every day for a month or 2, it will transform something in your mind. Okay, and then again, we develop something that's called contrived realizations of the Lam Rim. You'll have a contrived realization of it, meaning you're forcing it a little bit from the meditation. but eventually something flips and it becomes uncontrived the deeper your level of realization. Okay? And then what you need, and then all you do is you quickly go over the topic, and that will arise in your mind, that you know, and you see your guru and you know they're a Buddha. Like that. And it starts transforming your life, where you start participating in your Dharma activities differently. You start interacting with your teacher differently. You may generate more respect and faith. And you might even be able to spend more and more time with them if you like, attending more retreats with them, getting personal time with them, like that. It's really significant. And what happens is, if we're not doing the analytical meditations on the Lam Rim effectively, we're missing out on that whole level of our Dharma practice. And it's hard for me to really share that with students, because it's the one part often of practices that people are leaving out. And when they start meditating on the Lam Rim, they don't really get how to do it. And it's boring, and they go over and over the same thing, and they're more reading it, not letting it sink deeply. They're just looking at the line and kind of studying as they're going on. And that's not really meditating analytically like that. So it's very significant how it can start changing your mind, which changes your life. And the Dharma starts deepening. And then you start shifting some of your activities more into Dharma activities than these other things that you realize are really not making you happy. Okay? That. So I want to talk a little bit about remembering the kindness is another way to devote in thought. Remembering the kindness. And for me, the thing that moves me the most, one of the most things, is the story, in a sense, of the guru is kinder, they say, than all the Buddhas. The guru's kinder than all the Buddhas. So we say, well, Shakyamuni Buddha seemed pretty kind, that he went through all these incredible, austere experiences of starving and all these things with this wish not to escape his family responsibilities. And some people say, well, how is it he left his wife and son? How could he do that? And he did it out of incredible compassion, realizing that they were going to suffer and die and grow old and be sick, and he couldn't bear it. So out of that Mahakaruna, the great compassion, really wanting to bring an end to the suffering, really merged with that, he went off for 7 years to figure out there's got to be an end, and went through all these incredible endeavors, okay? So when you hear about that, and then you say the guru's kinder than that. So I really like the story of, like, and I've talked about this before, I think it's like a Buddha convention, right? They say there's 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. 1,000 Buddhas. And this is more of Buddhist cosmology, where there's, we can get the vastness of the universe, and how even before the Big Bang that created our galaxy, okay? Buddhism says there are always preceding causes to that. There's no beginning of anything. There's always a preceding cause, and there will be energy there. Something prior to the Big Bang. There was energy there. And there's always karma unfolding, a cause and effect relationship like that. So I kind of think of the 1,000 Buddhas just of our fortunate eon, they'd say. Shakyamuni Buddha being one of them, okay? And it was like they were all discussing how they're going to most benefit beings, and which world systems they're going to go to, and which beings, because these people over here in this world system, they're about to get enlightened in that pure realm. So one Buddha is like, I'm going to go there, because with this final teaching, all those infinite beings there, countless beings, they can get enlightened really quickly. And another one said, well, I'm going to go over here because these beings also are pretty highly evolved, and I'm just going to finish up that trail of teachings with them, and they're going to get enlightened. And I'm going to lead these beings. But so here's the deal, is nobody wanted us. Zambuleng, okay, the southern continent. Nobody wanted us, okay? And on one level, planet Earth is pretty beautiful. I think there's a lot of beautiful things you can focus on. But then there's some other things, right? And right now in the States, there's some beautiful things happening, but there's some things that are a complete mess, as you know. Every day a new drama unfolds with our political system. Just incredible. And the violence and the crime and the wars, and you can go on and on, the diseases, the poverty, the famines, all over poor areas like that. The refugee structure right now on the planet because of the wars and the poverties and the famines, because of the climate change and you get it. It's pretty bleak. So nobody wanted us. Nobody wanted us. Here we are. What are you going to do with your mind? No Buddha shows up. Shakyamuni Buddha said, I'll take them. I'll go there. And they call us those most difficult to subdue. And he said, I'll go there. Okay. When are you willing to roll through the muck for some beings? I mean, I'm talking about serious caca. When are you willing to step into it? We might do it for an hour. You go clean up a neighborhood. We have these little cleanup efforts, and you do it for an afternoon, great, and you feel good. Okay, this is countless lifetimes. He said, I'll take them, I'll go there, those most difficult to subdue. I always get so moved by that story of how kind, over and over. Think about that. Think about how kind. Well, the guru is kinder than all of that. Because I can't see the Buddha. I can't get those teachings directly. Thank you, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, for showing up in that form. Thank you, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for showing up in that form that I can connect with. Thank you, Geshe Tashi Tsering, all the other teachers, for showing up in a form I can see. I can hear the teachings from their mouths to our ears. Thank you. Unbelievable kindness. Unbelievable kindness. So you'd again meditate. Think about the Buddha's meeting. Think about our world system. What a mess. Think about Shakyamuni Buddha stepping out. I'll go there. I'll go there. Nobody wanted us, but he said, I'll go there. Well, the guru's kinder than all that. They're also, here's some other kindness. They're kind in teaching us the Dharma. They're kind in teaching us the Dharma. It's one thing to help a friend out, but if you teach them a way they can get out of their problems on their own, even more powerful for them. Okay, they don't just say, hi, I'm enlightened, I've been to the treasure, I know where the treasure is. They then hand you the map. Here's the map. And if you'd like and you get stuck, you can ask me advice, and I'm going to tell you and guide you where to go. And what do? We don't ask. We end up turning right when we should have gone left. The map said left, but over there I saw this tree with beautiful, delicious fruit. I'm going to go over there. And then I slow down my enlightenment by countless lifetimes. Okay, so they teach us the Dharma. They teach us all the time how to get out. Are you putting those teachings into practice, right? Something to think about, okay? Their kindness in blessing our minds. Kind in blessing our minds. What does that mean? Well, for me, I've been at retreats. Some of you have been at retreats with a teacher like Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And there'll be, if there's a longer retreat, occasionally Rinpoche has some holy relics with him or a special prayer wheel or something. He allows everybody to come up afterwards. Okay, and what they do is there's a big line of people. Many of you have seen this. And you get to make an offering in a nice envelope. You put an offering. And that's from your side of practicing generosity. So they allow you to do that. Okay, our cultures don't think that's something we should be allowed to do, that's an opportunity to practice Dharma. We don't understand that generosity is the cause of the flourishing of the Dharma in your life, as well as your own prosperity. So we're not really generous cultures necessarily. We live by charity begins at home. But then in Buddhism, you get into generosity is the first of the perfections leading you to this enlightened attitude of bodhicitta. Cherishing others more than yourself. How do we do that? Well, there's an opportunity. So they let people do that. But while you get to give an offering, they give you blessings. They'll give you a blessing string, like a string you can wear around your neck, like this. I feel protected. I got this string that was blessed. They did a special ceremony over it, like that. And then Rinpoche sometimes would take this relic and put it on your head. Give you, if you want to feel like just get blessings. When I've done certain retreats and certain preliminary practices in retreat settings for instance, at Laudo or something like that. And when I've actually asked Rinpoche for the next instruction, and Rinpoche told me to do this practice or that practice, right? So when I did the practice and may have run into some snags, some troubles, difficulties, or had questions, but I didn't have anyone to ask there at the time, right? I still felt the blessings. Like I could kind of conjure Rinpoche up, just feel him in my heart and kind of just imagine and say, Rinpoche, what should I do here? Or this is really difficult, or I'm too cold, or like this, I'm struggling, like that. And somehow the energy would shift because you have the blessings. They bless your mind like that. Absolutely. The last is the kindness of attracting us to their circle by giving gifts. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is the king of gifting. He loves to always, he's always, one time I was in the room with him at Kopan, his kind of more private room at Kopan, and all the drawers are filled with all these gifts people have given him. He doesn't need the gifts. But one time he wanted to give me things for my mandala, and your mandala it's a little, it's a set of a little plate, and then I have 3 rings, and I use it for preliminary practice to build up these rings with a certain chanting that I could do. And it's something we often do at the beginning of teachings to create that cause of I offer, it's to show you make an offering to get those teachings. We've kind of gotten far away from that now. But Rinpoche and teachers like to give you things for your mandala set. So Rinpoche reaches in this drawer and he pulls out this whole handful of these precious, beautiful stones, polished stones. And he's like, here, and there's too many, so I have to open my palms. And he's just pouring these polished stones. He goes, oh, for your mandala, here. He's always giving malas to people, precious stone malas and wooden malas. And this, he's given me sets of robes every year to all the teachers, all the Western teachers, always offering sets of robes. He's offering robes, the beautiful golden cloth they drape, the Shakyamuni Buddha statue in the center of the grand stupa in Bodh Gaya, India, where the Buddha got enlightened. That robe is constantly changing if you ever are able to go there on pilgrimage and see. And you yourself can make a donation where they will offer a new robe. And Rinpoche does that constantly, offering a new robe to the Buddha there. And when I go there, they have these offering bowls, big offering bowls, right? And I go out through the market and I buy a whole bunch of fruit and stuff, and I wash the fruit, and flowers, whatever, and you can bring it right into the stupa, and they'll give you a bowl and you fill it up really nicely, and you do an offering practice, and you make an offering. So Rinpoche is always trying to practice that generosity. And look how the organization has grown like that because of that generosity, So 4 ways you can meditate slowly on the kindness. Very powerful part of how kind the guru is. And it's nice to reflect on the kindness of your guru. And then we come to how to devote with deeds. How to devote with deeds. So the kindness ends the part of devoting in thought, which is part of the main part of the Guru devotion teachings. And then you would devote with deeds. What does that mean? Okay. I can rely on the teacher. I can decide to take a teacher for one and find a spiritual guide. That would be an activity like that, the action of doing it. I can then ask their advice for something. Should I do this retreat or this retreat? I know some people, some of you, in fact, I'm sure, have got to a point where people have come to me and asked and said, I've decided I want to offer service to Rinpoche. It's a big step. I want to offer service to Rinpoche. What does that mean? Okay, I did it myself. And what it meant for me, I'll just speak personally, what it meant for me was in the early 90s, I had a job at a magazine, and it was a good job. I was paid well. I lived in San Francisco, and I had been building my career. So I had gotten the university degree, had some jobs, kept getting better and better jobs. Then I got this great job at this magazine, and then I just met the Dharma on a 6-month trip where I took a break, had the fortune to take the break and take that kind of time off to assess my career, and moved in the States to a place much more open-minded than where I was living. It was great. And then continuing my career got a job at this magazine for 2 years, but I had already met the Dharma. And the Dharma was more, there was more centers in California at the time. So I started to check up on the Dharma that I had met with Rinpoche and other centers, Hindu ashrams and yoga centers and all kinds of different types of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Vipassana Buddhism, things like that. And then made a connection at Vajrapani Institute. We didn't have a center in San Francisco yet at that time. Now we do. And then slowly I was able to meet Rinpoche again there and ask some advice. I mentioned last week the advice I asked about going to Tibet, but then I met with Rinpoche at Vajrapani and I asked some more advice about my practice, but I still kept my life, my work at the magazine, my flat where I was living, like that still. And then what I decided was after 2 years at the magazine, I wanted to leave. I wasn't all that thrilled with the job, and it was a really good job. And I could have looked for another job that would have been easy at the time and progressed again. But the Dharma was kind of burning in me. I was much more interested in the Dharma, and I had been reading, going to weekend retreats when I could, studying a little bit more. I had gone to a teaching with the Dalai Lama. I had met a couple other teachers and saw Rinpoche again, and slowly, and I started thinking, what if I took a year off instead of 6 months, took a year off and went to India to just do the Dharma for a year. I knew I could come back and reestablish my career. So I thought that was a safe enough time. I went and did that, got so immersed in the Dharma and found it so worthwhile. My own personal checking, saw Rinpoche during that time, took many teachings, did some retreats. I extended the year to almost 2 years. And when I came back after 2 years, back to San Francisco, at that time, I checked again with Rinpoche because I thought of going back and picking up my career, which was a little more challenging, but I could have done it, right? And somehow I decided to offer service to Rinpoche and thought, well, if I could ask Rinpoche about what might be some positive work at a center right now, I wonder what would happen. And then I went to 2 different centers in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time and ended up at the San Francisco Center, which was simply a nun's home. It was a nun's home. So, and at that time in the early 90s, our centers rarely had any paid positions. It was all volunteer. So would I be able to make it work to support myself? Okay. So again, if you have serious intent to practice Dharma, and you have this strong wish and you see the worthwhileness of it, it's hard to say, I can't see anything more worthwhile, but I am a nun, okay? But I was a lay person before, right? And we have difficulties in our lives, whether we're ordained and following the Guru's advice, or whether we're a lay person without even a teacher. There's always difficulties showing up. So would you like the difficulties to be more of an aspect of purification, furthering you on a path more quickly to enlightenment, so you can benefit all living beings? Or would you just like it to be difficulties like that? So I asked Rinpoche, I was willing to follow. I started living at this center. I lived with the nun for 3 years. She offered me a room. Like, all the circumstances, is what I'm saying, worked out. The Buddhas will make a way for you. It doesn't mean it will be without difficulties, but they will make a way. I found part-time work. I was able to support myself. I lived simply. I was really happy. And I seemed to somehow have everything I needed. I usually would visit my family twice a year. I still did that. Somehow the plane tickets manifested. I was able to do it. I wanted to go back to India from time to time and do more retreats and study more deeply. I always did it. Then Rinpoche asked me to run another center, right? And I could still do a lot of practice while I was running the center. Just depends how you organize your time and things. But I basically never looked back. And I feel like I've had everything I wanted. I've been able to do longer retreats. I've been able to teach around the world. or something I love doing. If it's, and Rinpoche's encouraged me to do it. And so again, we get scared of, I won't be able to have this and this and this. And what about my house? What about my condo? What about my flat? How will I be able to do it? Okay, it really depends what you want in here. What is speaking to you in here? And can you cultivate that bigger opening? So are we going to ask and check with somebody who knows? Or are you going to ask all the other beings limited who might not know what's best for you? So that's a way to devote with action, obtaining his or her advice and following the advice wholeheartedly. And okay. And through offering service is part of that. I found it incredibly, not only deepens my path, there's no question. There's no question. It has not been perfect. I'm not perfect. So the path isn't just going to go swimmingly well. No, the darker, the deeper the difficulties sometimes, I have to say, the more transformation I've gotten out of it. Seems to be how it is. And the whole realm of it is not perfect because this is samsara. You know, so just because you go and serve at a center, people used to come to Vajrapani when we were hiring. This is a place that had like 15 people living there, you know, 9 of them staff at one point when I was there. We would hire people. And I was most concerned about the people that came that would say, why do you want to live here? We'd interview. And they'd say, because I want to live at a really peaceful place where everybody gets along. Okay. Those aren't Buddhist centers. And people go, really? You know, people put Buddhist centers on these pedestals. They put Buddhist monks and nuns or teachers on a pedestal. They project a lot of things onto us. Okay, I am a Buddhist. I'm not a Buddha, I'm a Buddhist. I'm on the path, I'm trying my best. I'm a human being who makes mistakes, like that. So the centers are places like great boiling pots that you can shed off some negative tendencies and behavior if you're willing to deal with your mind and really have your eyes open. Brilliant places to serve centers, to serve a teacher. Really fantastic work, provided you're willing to get in there in the trenches. Okay. Okay. I want to talk about when things go wrong. What happens when things go wrong? Okay. So, and so the other thing I wanted to mention about putting Buddhist centers, Buddhist teachers, monks and nuns on pedestals, there have been a number of scandals, as you're aware of, with Buddhist centers, teachers, beings you might see as highly enlightened, esteemed teachers, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, other types of abuse absolutely happens at Buddhist places and with Buddhist teachers. I'm sorry to inform you. Why does this happen and how does it happen? People say, I thought Buddhists are perfect. I thought they're all about kindness. Why would they ever harm somebody? Why would they ever subject a student to harm or confusion? People ask me about the monks in Burma, in Myanmar, when they were burning the Rohingya. Why did that happen? They're Buddhist monks. Okay, again, it doesn't mean they're clean, clear consciousness. It doesn't mean they have that. They're Buddhists. That means they could be imperfect. They don't know. They're subject to cultural racism, things like that. Who knows what happened? Terrible mistake gone wrong. Okay. So there have been some very renowned teachers, some of you may know, in Buddhist traditions, like that, in our lineage, out of our lineage, like that have gotten into things, some of them ordained, some not ordained, male, female, different stories I've heard of. So the thing for you, it's between, in a sense, you and your mind and your guru. What happens? Okay. Keep checking. And one thing Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, and this is one thing I've noticed with Rinpoche per se, because he's my main teacher, is as soon as an organization grows, and I'll take the FPMT, for instance, as soon as an organization gets bigger, a bureaucracy sets in. And there could be hierarchical, what we label hierarchical structures. that are necessary for a level of organization. Okay, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. It just is. And I'm just using certain terminology I think you can relate to. But once that happens, there become cliques, and there becomes a kind of us and them. And I've seen it in all sorts of organizations, spiritual, faith-based, and not. And one example I had when I went to Vajrapani, Vajrapani at the time in the 90s was a still kind of a small center in a forest. And it didn't, we set up an administrative structure. That was one of the things I did when I was there, but it didn't have any of that or really any functioning staff when I was there. Nobody was really being paid. There were no health benefits or proper housing or anything. And I was doing some work with a center in Northern California called Spirit Rock Meditation Center, some of you've heard of. This is a big Vipassana center founded by people like Jack Kornfield. And it's a beautiful center in a different tradition. And they had been going for years, and they're in a very affluent county, which was very different than our county at the time. And they had thousands of donors and were building out their place. And I met with the executive director, and we became friends, and I really liked her and respected her. And I met with her to get ideas, to pick her brain about, and one comment, she was introducing me to the staff and showing me around and talking to me about when they were going to build out their place, which was happening in the next few years. And she said to me, and some of three of their teachers still held a retreat every year at Vajrapani at that time. And she said, yeah, they always talk about how nice it is to go back. And she said the word back to Vajrapani, to go back to this smaller place. She said the way we used to be before we got more developed and bigger. And so I heard that, and I was just so in the trenches with the difficult work we were doing at the time that I just wanted to already be developed and bigger, but that was not the karma at Vajrapani. And that's never been my karma at centers. I always end up on the poor, unfortunate center on the other side of the hill from the big, rich, whatever, over there, like that. But there's something blessed about being the poor, smaller center, because you have less of that bureaucracy, less of the us and them. But even at Vajrapani, once we developed a staff of 9 people or 15 people living on the property, and there still was a little us and them, like as if we're different, because I made a decision about something that somebody disagreed with, so suddenly it separates us. Did anybody have the notion I might have made the decision based on a good motivation because I thought this was the best thing to do for everybody, for the greater good? But when you get into the us and them, and that duality in your mind is where it comes from. The lack of understanding in your mind, the lack of clear knowledge and penetrative insight is where the us and them comes from, that duality. Okay. So you're not seeing things clearly. Okay. So I've been in some retreats with Lama Zopa Rinpoche the last few years, and then I found a lot of criticism of Rinpoche and the organization. A lot of criticism I hear, okay? I've had my own criticism at the organization at times. Some things I've seen that I was kind of like, why do they do it that way? Why don't they improve this? Or, and Rinpoche some years ago, we were talking and he said, if the organization doesn't have the karma to be organized, it won't be. Okay, that doesn't mean you give up and you go, oh, it's all karma, it doesn't matter. No, you keep working towards things because karma changes. And there were times I saw these unfoldings of change. There were times at Vajrapani I thought, this will never change. It's always going to be like this. And then something would shift, right? And so with Rinpoche, I really tried to steer clear of negativities about him because he's my teacher, and that's a really heavy thing to get into with your teacher. But if I do see something, I go back to, could my perceptions be mistaken? Because they're mistaken about a lot of things. So if I'm seeing something negative in my teacher, one thing is to ask yourself, this may be a way they're just showing me this aspect because this is the karma that I have and I'm able to connect with them in this way. Okay, I'm not laying a trip that I've got an impure mind and I'm terrible. but at least I'm able to see them in a certain way. Okay. This is just one view I'm giving, one side. And then Rinpoche kept saying in these retreats, if you're prone to a lot of the negativity and a lot of the judgmental criticism in a negative way, without wanting to find an improvement or find a positive influence in it, he said, why don't you focus more on finding the qualities in your guru? Look at the qualities, because the more you get into the negative, 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 that's all you start seeing of them. And it starts degenerating your view. So as soon as they show up, all you're going to start seeing are all those negative aspects, which your mind becomes more familiar with. Understand? That makes sense now. On the flip side, I want to go on to the flip side. But you don't just accept negative behavior. If you're seeing something really challenging, a friend comes to you and they say, I went to this retreat. This happened to me personally at one point with one teacher, and who was not a monk. Okay. They went to a retreat. And while I was on the retreat, this is what happened. And I was really in an exploratory phase. I had just moved to the San Francisco area. I was new to Buddhism. I had met Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I had met a few other teachers. Okay. I was going once in a while on the weekend to Vajrapani, which is 2 hours from San Francisco. But there were other teachers in the San Francisco city as well, and other centers. And I was going to those. And one of them came through and had an organization in that area. And then he was going to lead a retreat over one of our holidays. So it was like a several-day retreat. I booked myself there. There were a lot of people. They rented a facility and we went onto this retreat. And I was a lay person at the time. And during the retreat, the teacher kept finding me, if I was taking a walk, would find me alone or single me out privately, ask to see me privately. I would come to see them and then talking to me. And I felt it was a little bit too sexual, just what they were saying to me, and trying to get me to meet them after the retreat for a date. This is what was happening to me during the 4 days of the retreat. Okay, I'm not anybody special. This happened with other women, with this teacher. Okay. So I didn't know how to think about it. And I kind of thought on one level, we go through this, well, they're a teacher. Wow, this is cool. I can have more time with them. I'm special. Okay. I can have more time with them. I don't think they asked. I checked with a couple other people because I was also confused. And I said, did he mention, getting together or, and they were like, no. And I said, okay. So I left the retreat. I didn't want to give a phone number. I didn't feel comfortable. I wasn't sure. And what that did, because I still wasn't sure about a guru and what that was. I wasn't really devoted to any guru at the time. But part of what it did is it had me racing back to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, a monk of somebody that, and it doesn't mean that monks are perfect. Doesn't mean nuns are perfect. Okay. But it had me running back to Lama Zopa, who I never had any inkling of any feeling like that, of anything off base with Rinpoche. Never, in the short time I'd known him. Longer than the other teacher. But I never had any kind of weird stuff with Rinpoche like that. Nothing. So it was, again, helping me glue my relationship with that teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And because there are some people that are not your teacher, and you may keep trying to connect, or getting missed messages like that from them. Like, I don't want to go on a date with you. But then later, this teacher, somehow we made some connection, or he had my phone number, and I got a phone call from them when I was back home where I was living. I got a phone call. We met again at some thing, and I maybe decided to give him a phone number. He found it on the mailing list, and he phoned me up a couple of times, this other teacher, and was clearly trying to meet me alone, where I was living, whatever. And I kept saying, and so be discerning. Please be discerning. Please check up. And I needed to check up because what was going on for me here, it didn't feel clean, clear. This was my own interpretation from my limited mind, but you need to check that. I just didn't feel comfortable with that. Okay. And so on the phone, I started saying, well, what does Rinpoche want to meet with me about? You know, and I was a professional fundraiser. So sometimes these organizations would find me and want me to fundraise for them. I get that. And I get a lot of calls about that, of people trying to pull me in that way. Oh, well, you can have this if you, when they tell me it's about something else, but they really just want me to do the fundraising or talk to me about the fundraising. So then I said, is it about fundraising for your organization? So a different organization than FPMT. Was it about fundraising? And then he'd say, no, no, no. No, I don't want to talk with you about work. I don't want to talk about fundraising or, and I said, oh, well, what, I tried to be respectful. So the thing is, be respectful in your mind. Be respectful with your words and your activities. I always kept this teacher in a respectful place in my mind. And I just said, well, please, Rinpoche, could you let me know a little bit? I like to know before I'm meeting with somebody, the nature of the meeting, what we might be meeting about. So I tried to make it very businesslike, right? Because I didn't feel comfortable personally. I didn't feel a need to meet alone like that. I didn't have any personal questions for him. Where Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I was very happy to meet alone, and I had a whole list of questions that, you know, like that. So then the teacher went on to say something about, well, I just wanted to get together personally, right? And then I think I just said something about, I'm a little busy next week. If, you know, I got his phone number and I said, let me see when I might be free and I'll be in touch, like that. And I just wanted to hang up to see how I'd feel about it. And I didn't have any obligation to call back. It wasn't being rude if I didn't call back. I just kind of left it open like that and never called back. And I saw this teacher over the years from time to time, when before I was a nun and after I was a nun, like that. And this teacher went on to have more serious issues with some female students, unfortunately. So again, you do need to be discerning to check up if something's not going right and not going well, and to say, and you can say, no, that's not working for me. And if you do ask advice and you find, the main thing is, please check up thoroughly before you are seeking advice, before you've taken that person as a teacher. It's beneficial to first, again, I've said this before, His Holiness says, if you need to, take 6 years and be a spy on your guru. Be a spy on your guru. That will take effort from your side, meaning, what does that mean to be a spy on your guru? It could be you're traveling somewhere to get to their teachings in person. You decided to sign up for a part of a retreat or the whole retreat. You've made the time in your life to sit with them day in, day out for at least, you know, a session or two a day where you're getting that exposure. You then have formulated some questions you'd like to ask privately and ask for an appointment, a personal appointment, an interview, whatever. Sometimes the disciples, the attendants, this happens with Lama Zopa Rinpoche because there's so many students now, okay? The attendants will ask you, if you want to see Rinpoche, write down on a piece of paper your name, your phone number, and what it is, just one line of what, 1 or 2 lines, what is it most essential? What are your questions, or what do you want to see Rinpoche about, especially if they don't know you. Now, if you're running a center, it's different. If you're the director of a center, you usually have a little bit more priority. If you're a monk or nun who's a disciple of Rinpoche, you might have a little bit more priority, but not necessarily. Some new students get in, they have a connection with Rinpoche. They have a serious question. The questions you tend to ask your gurus are going to be 3 categories only, really. Practice questions, serious practice questions, serious health-related issues, or a major life decision. Those are the things you tend to want to put into the categories. If I say serious practice questions, I might say to Rinpoche, I'm going to do this retreat next year at Laudo for 3 months. And I'm kind of thinking, should I do this retreat or that retreat? I might ask between 2 retreats. Or I told Rinpoche I was going to do 1 retreat. And then how did that sound? Was that okay? Because I was going to take a break, a sabbatical from running a center. Rinpoche said, great. wholeheartedly wonderful, because he knew I would work it out with the community and I wouldn't leave unless it was worked out with the community. And then he made an adjustment after your afternoon sessions, do this practice in the afternoon sessions, which was not something I had remotely thought about doing. And I did that practice in those sessions, the afternoon sessions. It was the perfect thing I needed to do at that time. And I did it again with the blessing because Rinpoche suggested I do it. So I have that blessing from what I believe is a more enlightened consciousness, like that. So you're going to ask a serious practice question. I do know people now. I do these consultations with people. So 3 students have decided to ask Rinpoche for their life practice advice via email. I believe 2 of them, I don't even think have met Rinpoche or been in any teachings. They felt an affinity. They've watched some videos online. They've read some of the books, and they wanted to get serious about their practice instead of kind of wondering, should I do prostrations in the morning? Should I focus on this? Should I focus on that? Like that. They asked via email, okay, how does it work? They've never met Rinpoche. Qualified guru like that, high level of realization. Rinpoche checks specifically for each person, and they got practices back via email. Booklets of practice. I mean, this is a life practice. So you have to be prepared to want to do it. And Rinpoche says right there in the practice, please take this seriously because I checked it just for you. Please don't waste my time. I think it's good that he added that because people would want to get these life practices just to see their meditational deity, because Rinpoche will check that as well. And what the meditational deity means, or the yidam, what it means is the practice or practices, there could be 1 or 2 or 3 of them. And those are the practices that is a quicker path to enlightenment for you. If you get those initiations, read the commentaries, do the retreats, it can shortcut your path dramatically. Only the highly qualified guru could give you those meditational deities. So I know people that just wanted it, they got the meditational deity and had no intention of doing any of the rest of the suggestions that Rinpoche gave. And as a result, their practice hasn't really flourished as much. They haven't really been doing much practice, frankly. So that's not the way to engage in those types of practices. You want to do it. I know one woman, fantastic. She got the practices. She's made all the different notebooks, binders. So it's very clear for her. This is one text Rinpoche suggested she read. This is how to meditate on the Lam Rim. These are another set of preliminary practices for her to do and how to do it. So she's all organized. Brilliant. No problem like that. Fantastic. So very clear way to do it. And she's slowly moving into these practices. There's 2 other people that have asked me, they get the practice and then they go, can I go over these practices with you? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's fantastic. There's a lot of standardization now in these practices, which is great. There's red writing that's been checked just for you, but there's other black writing that is standardized. And the reason I'm saying it's brilliant is in the old days, we'd have a meeting with Rinpoche individually. And then Rinpoche suggests, do this practice like that. And then there you are, jotting down all the notes of the motivation Rinpoche's telling you how to meditate on. You could never get it all. So you'd kind of be in the middle of the retreat some months later or a year later, and you just do the best you could. Now there's booklets and there's all kinds of materials so that you get the most benefit out of it. It's an easier, I'll put it this way, it's an easier time to practice, more support, but less of us are practicing like that anymore. Less of us practicing. More and more people were doing retreat in those days, and now there's less, but the materials are so clear and so organized. So there are people that are decided to do that, and they're willing to do that. That's a, more intense level of your practice when you're ready. That could be available to you if you feel an affinity to Lama Zopa Rinpoche. But again, if things go south, and I mentioned, so I was running a center and Milarepa Center in Vermont after Vajrapani, and Rinpoche and I discussed my going there, right? And I agreed. I was the one who even said to Rinpoche, I think we should Milarepa had a lot of obstacles and just couldn't quite develop ever. It just wasn't working. Many years. It was very similar when I got into the Dharma. In the States, there were only two centers at the time, Vajrapani Institute in California and Milarepa Center in Vermont, on the either sides of the states. What happened with Vajrapani is it happened to develop with a large Dharma community around it. So all those people volunteered their time for years to create that center, and that community is still around there. So it was a brilliant area for the center to develop and flourish, and it's thriving. Milarepa Center the community just never happened. It's a different part of the country, and it just never happened like that. It happened to a center next door to Milarepa Center of another lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, Karma Choling. Karma Choling is a big retreat center of the great master Trungpa Rinpoche. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was a great master in the Kagyu tradition, kind of cross Kagyu Nyingma, but mostly Kagyu tradition. And there's been controversies with that group, some recent controversies, past controversies again, of some serious things that happened. One of the stories, the old stories there, was Trungpa Rinpoche passed away. He designated an heir, kind of a senior student to take on for people to consult with and for him to kind of run the organization because it was growing. This was in the 70s, 80s, in the 80s. And this student, who was not a monk, developed HIV infection, AIDS, and had sex with several students, not telling them that he was infected with HIV when he knew he had HIV. And he infected many people, one of whom died of AIDS. So when I got into Vermont, many, many years later, there was a lot of hostility from the community about Buddhism because of that incident. Again, somebody confused. Doesn't mean the person is enlightened. Maybe some of his disciples saw him as enlightened. You need to be discerning. If a teacher's doing something like that, check up. You know, it doesn't mean you need to devote. It doesn't mean you need to have sex with them. It doesn't mean that that's the path for you. Check up like that. It did a lot of harm for people, unfortunately. A lot of harm. So Rinpoche and I were discussing Milarepa Center, and I, from my side, said, let's try one more time. Let's give it another shot with my skills. And so I was working too hard there. I just, and the way it was set up, there was no space. I was in a little room that doubled as my office in the house. I could never get a day off. I mean, just a workaholic. And after a few years, I was so worn out that there was these things I was trying to do to develop the property, a lot of work. And then there was stuff, Rinpoche was very busy, and I couldn't get some of these things that the attendants were going to give to me. And it kept falling through the cracks, and I got angry. And I felt like I got angry at Rinpoche. I think I mentioned this maybe in the first session we did, but I felt a little bit like I got angry at Rinpoche. There was like a moment clearly of annoyance. And they say if you really are devoted to a teacher, you've accepted them as a teacher, and you're pretty sure they're your guru, and you get angry, it's really one of the worst things and can create terrible rebirths and all the negative things you can think about, right? So I knew how heavy this was, but the best thing they say to do is to confess. So as soon as I could, and in my heart I confessed, and the anger didn't really linger, it didn't kind of grow, but in my heart, but the next time, within the next year, I saw Rinpoche in India and got an appointment, and sometimes you have to push a little bit, but I knew I needed to see Rinpoche in person alone. I got into the appointment, made 3 prostrations, which is a thing of respect that you do, that I do any time I have a meeting with Rinpoche, I would do out of my respect and trying to develop some humility. And then I just right away confessed and said, Rinpoche, this happened. And I think I got angry at Rinpoche, I said. So Rinpoche sat there, and then he gets a little corner of his face, like a little half smile, because the best thing I could do was just confess. That almost takes it away. And then Rinpoche looked at me and said, little jokingly, like, how long were you angry for? And what he's doing is just checking my mind. I think just checking a little bit of, did it go on for a long time? What, was I really angry? And I said, I don't know, Rinpoche, maybe, a split second. It was like a very short incidents. And then I said, I'd like to know, I was very ardent of what practices, is there any additional practice Rinpoche could recommend that I could clearly purify that as quickly as possible, whatever. And then Rinpoche kind of waited and checked a little bit. And then I was already doing some of these other practices. And Rinpoche said, well, you already do that. So obviously I felt cleaned out of it, like, let it go. Then you let it go. You don't keep guiltily bringing it back up. I did this, I should have done that. I did it. I went, confessed, done, out of my mind, and on I go, freshly on. So I would, those are a few things when things get into problems. You've had in England, some of you may be aware, some not, doesn't matter. Years ago, a big rift in the organization from a couple of teachers splitting apart part of the organization. And it got really heavy at one point. And what do you do? Who do you go with? Again, check here, check what's going on. You may get swayed when all of these close friends of yours are going to go off with this teacher. Don't just run off like the lemmings over the cliff because they're all doing it. That can be dangerous. That's definitely got us into trouble at times. So do check. And even if you're the only one, but you just feel solid in your heart and your devotion that you need to go over here with this teacher, just do it. Or you know what? Sometimes take a couple steps back and take a break. Without having, I need to do this or this, just take a couple steps back then and give yourself a little bit of a break to see how things settle out. Okay, I've been talking for a long time. So I would like to just check in of any questions that are coming up right now. And I've got one question here. Okay, if you took Tantric Initiation, someone's asking, but the Lama wasn't your teacher before, and then there was a problem, not with yourself, but with someone else. So what's the rest of that question? What do you do? So again, if you took Tantric Initiation, if you take Tantric Initiation with someone, that person becomes your Vajra Guru. Vajra Guru. Slightly different levels of those qualities I mentioned at a deeper level, those 10 qualities we had of the Guru. When you take Tantric Initiation, I would be very skillful to make sure you already feel there's some affinity with you and this teacher, first of all. That's a more serious connection you're making. So you may have wanted to make sure you maybe had refuge with this teacher, or that at least you've watched some videos of them or have been at a regular teaching with them first before you jump into a Tantric Initiation with them, because that's a very serious level. You may never see them again. You may not ask any advice to them. It's all fine, absolutely. But you do have Tantric vows with them. And often they'll give Bodhisattva vows before the Tantric vows. And you need to keep a very high regard of them in your mind. So if there's a mistake made and you didn't check the teacher out and they're creating a problem with another student, your mind can get kind of negative on them and it can create some obstructions in your spiritual path. What else, anybody? Yes, a few questions. Let's see, Sherry?
Yes, hi, Vanemi. Thank you very much for sharing. I was wondering whether, the experience that you gave about facing, I guess, inappropriate behavior from a teacher. So I understand, like on the individual level, where you sort of have that discerning approach towards them. But is there anything that we can do kind of institutionally or organizationally to ensure that, or to help that they're not harming others? or I guess, trying to help prevent their own negative karma from increasing?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. More and more, as you know, in the world right now, the whole Me Too movement got started. It spread around the world, there's no question. So as a result of that, there are institutions, organizations, NGOs, your centers, that some of which have issued statements. Excuse me. They've issued statements about sexual, gender, racial, ageist equality for people. And some of them have it in their bylaws. They have it on their websites under guidelines. We've had centers that have issued things about the Black Lives Matter movement without being overly political, but saying about reminding people that we accept people of any persuasion and are open to that and will not tolerate blah, blah, blah. So I think there are statements like that. The other thing that I would recommend organizations do, some do it better than others, is to investigate any charges that are brought up. And some organizations are doing that. And it's also good to get an objective organization to help do the investigation for you than your own internal investigation. Some people feel fine to have an internal investigation if they trust that, and some don't and want to get a separate organization to check on that. One of the hard parts, and I will speak about this a little bit, I'm a little hesitant to get heavily into it, but I will mention the P word, patriarchy, okay? We're in my favorite season now, the fall of the patriarchy, okay? Sorry, but as we know, Tibetan Buddhism, I think it's really hard to get around that it doesn't exist without a patriarchal structure. I mean, it just is a given, and it is kind of from the time of the Buddha teaching. You have to look at the times. There were these large community of males that were able to study. That wasn't the role of the culture 2,600 years ago. It's still not necessarily anything we've grown through so much into 2020 right now, fully. There were a large community of monastics, most of whom were monks. The fully ordained lineage doesn't exist for women in the Tibetan system. There's again and again, you come to hurdles as a woman, not only in my path with the FPMT or Tibetan Buddhism in the world, okay? So part of me looks at the karmic makeup of that as coming back as a woman, okay? It's very difficult for women, and I will say, to say this as strongly, most of the men I know, as evolved as they are and as wonderful as they are and dear, they don't get it. They just cannot get it unless you're in a female body. It's the same way I do not get what it's like to be Black in America unless my skin is dark colored. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to have an experiential realization of that. I can't, because I'm white. So I accept that. And I know how my Black friends and I discuss it, how we work together, how we talk to each other. And I know there's certain times when they're like, girl, you just aren't woke. And I'm like, okay, I got it. You're right. You're right. And I don't ask them to help me wake up. Don't put it on us to do it. So guys, educate yourselves. Figure out what's going on. Look at your roles in your families. Look at how you're interrelating and stuff. So we're happy to give a few guidelines, but so it's tricky. So I know some women that have said they feel there's a lot of space for them in Tibetan Buddhism because they don't have all these extra expectations of the monks and things. And yet mostly these days, it's been the hardest for the Western women and the Western nuns, I found. So years ago, we were dealing with the Tibetan nuns, meaning they were, when I showed up in Buddhism in the late 80s, it had already been going on for some years. The hippies had come in the 70s. Okay, I showed up a bit later. In the late 80s, when I went to Kopan, the nuns were doing a bit of chanting. There were a few nuns, many less than the monks. They were doing a bit of chanting, a little bit of study. They were washing monks' robes. They were clearly secondary citizens like that. The nuns always sit at the back of the monks like that. And you'll even have a fully ordained monk who may have just gotten full ordination. And you will have a novice nun who's been ordained for 30 years. And that fully ordained monk in the Tibetan tradition would still sit in front of the nun. Okay, in those segments of the way it used to be. Now there's a lot more, when Westerners show up, sometimes they sit side by side. But when you go to hear His Holiness teach at the monasteries in South India, you'll never find rarely find Tibetan nuns sitting anywhere close to the front. It's full of monks. But here's the other thing is the Western and Asian lay people, they don't get it that monks and nuns should sit in the front of our section as well. They don't really, that's not how they treat us as well. So it just in general, monks and nuns. So there's a lack of respect for Sangha in general with the non-Himalayan cultures, I find, general. And Rinpoche's spoken to that directly and said, everybody needs to wake up to treat all the Sangha that way. So first it was the Tibetan nuns that were really at the bottom. And then a lot of Western nuns, Western women started really speaking for them, getting them. And now they have these beautiful nunneries built, full study programs, and can become Geshe Ma, that has been approved by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to have that PhD equivalent. And they can technically do that. There are some traditional Tibetan lamas that don't recognize it because in order to complete that level of study, you're supposed to have studied Vinaya, and you're not supposed to study that until you have full ordination and all the vows. The nuns' full ordination would have something like 364 vows, to the monks 352, something like that, because in ancient days, again, there were more things that could happen to women. So it was about protection, more protection for women. And over the years, I've heard from some fully ordained nuns that ordained in Taiwan, they talk about ways of adapting some of those ancient vows so that it is possible for you to keep them like that. But it is very nice to try to traditionally keep them. It's impossible to do that in the West. I think it's nearly impossible to do that in the West. As a fully ordained nun, it's a little bit more lenient for the monks. So just to say that is understanding. So now what's happened is, unfortunately, the Western nuns right now seem to be at the bottom, where there seems to be less functioning nunneries. We're starting to create some more, but I think the nuns are more hesitant to go there. We're independent women. So we're used to doing some things more independently, and can that kind of evolve slowly to be able to support us with a better structure that would still allow us to live within our vows and live in community and be able to take care of each other like that and be supported by the lay community. So I don't know if that, sorry, I went on for a bit about that.
No, that's fine. That's helpful. Thank you. I
so-
guess just then, so then in terms of addressing it sort of individually on a direct level, like in terms of how you understand and interpret and discern that behavior, is it okay then to then try and address it in a more institutional way? So actually, like,
Yes,
rather
sorry,
than sort of walking away from it, but yeah.
Yeah. So then what I would do is, you certainly can. And I'll give you some things I've done over the years. I've written letters. Years ago, a few of us, I think 3 or 4 women, wrote a letter to the FPMT board at the time that didn't have equal representation on it. And then from that, they started adopting, they said at that point, this language about equality on that level. And then they had changed the board, shifted the board. Then it shifted back, okay? It shifted back under the direction of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And I had to kind of look at that. And then there was criticism from some of my female friends about that. And then we started drafting another letter and all of that. And then, but the thing was, I did try to go back into my Guru devotion, my relationship with Rinpoche, but which by then was many, many years old. So I had so many more experiences of the benefits that this particular being has done for my mind than to see criticism of him. And so I started trusting there was a reason Rinpoche wanted to do this now and wanted to lead our organization. and I kind of backed off a little bit. Was it spineless? I don't know. I can't say. But then now the board's changed again based on people speaking up and saying there needs to be more equal representation. So now there's more women, I think 2 American women back on the board or something. So I think institutionally you can address it through a variety of ways. There's also been with some organizations lawsuits to address some of the things, and that a statement has to be issued or a settlement needs to be paid, or there is a final judgment of this teacher being suspended from teaching for blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so I think there's a variety of things you can do institutionally as well. And again, you look at some of the organizations and can it be disappointing and not necessarily fulfilling what you'd like? And yes, it can be. And then for me, I've come back to samsara's nature. It's imperfect. I'm not excusing some of the inequality and things like that. I'm still working on it in my own personal way to see, can I still participate and do the things my teachers asked me to do, which so far I haven't found that many barriers to be able to do it. I do run into some snags of how I'm treated as a teacher by a number of our centers, as a woman who teaches, as a nun who teaches, compared to some of my male friends who've, we talk, the teachers talk. So I have noticed, and a number of my female friends that teach, ordained and not, mention the same discrepancies. So that's kind of sad. And I think that's a level of educating each other, discussing it with the centers and for our organization, which tries to let the center directors know and the spiritual program coordinators what needs to happen for all the teachers. So we do the best we can. It's not a perfect world. I hope that's helpful, Sherry.
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, somebody else had a hand up. Was it Patty or? Other questions, comments?
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about lineage gurus? What's our relationship would be for them? Because if we look back at some of the histories of them, we find stories that perhaps might not be as wonderful as we'd like. We hear stories about gurus killing people back in the past and things, and we still have this relationship with them as gurus. What's the best way to deal with things like that?
Okay, thank you. And I do want to add as well, before we finish today, that just to go back to what Sherry's saying, and also a little bit fitting in with what Tim is mentioning is, so I do have friends that have left the FPMT because they have not found it balanced and productive for them or supportive. And I respect that. And I understand all the issues that have gone on. I've had my own issues, and through my own checking and my own process and my own study and my own practice, I've just found right now that, this is the best path for you. You don't need an organization to get enlightened. I don't need FPMT to get enlightened, but it is an organization I've spent more than 30 years connected to and I teach for. So, yeah, problems arise and I see, does it affect me in a big way? Does it affect a small way? Sometimes it doesn't affect me at all. But if it is something in a bigger level, sometimes I've gotten involved, I've spoken up, I've written letters, you do what you can. And yet I don't feel to leave the organization or to denounce it in a sense, based on there's been also, I again like to also focus on the tremendous benefit that the organization is doing. And if I'm bringing it back to my practice to layering karma there and layering, trying to find the benefits and samsara and all those things, I'm using the whole picture to try to, and I'm always checking, is it still working for me? Is it not working for me? What adjustments do I need to make? That's something we need to do on our spiritual path, continually on the path. You can change up your practice every few years because it gets a little bit stale. So, you're constantly, I hope you're all growing. you're continuing to grow and read and study. I think it's brilliant. And as a result of that, things wind and weave. I teach differently than I do now, than I did 20 years ago. So, you know, until somebody says to me there's no more benefit, okay, then I'd stop teaching like that. But I'm still growing and learning and unfolding in my practice. So to go on to what Tim is saying, to give you the story, something I didn't talk about necessarily, where if, for instance, ancient days, I just want to mention Marpa and Milarepa, and most of you know this story. And it's really beautiful to read the story of some, if you like this, some of the books about the ancient lives. There's books on Marpa, there's a book on Milarepa, and they're really beautiful to read. And as you know, the story of Milarepa, who was a terror at one point, he practiced black magic. He killed a bunch of people. His mother had told him to practice this black magic on his relatives. I think you know the story. Killed these people. Somehow through some karmic seed arising, he had tremendous regret about the activities of the killing and realized what harm it was not only doing for them, but for his mind, and developed very strong renunciation that he wouldn't do it again. He didn't want to ever do it again, but he also wanted to clean up what he had done. So in cleaning up what he had done, in ancient days, it was really about finding a spiritual teacher. That was much more of an accepted approach for those that could walk on a spiritual path, because many people were not. They were householders and raising crops and having animals and things like that. So Milarepa knew there was this kind of, from India, sadhu culture, okay, but he's in Tibet and that area of Nepal, Western Tibet. So he realizes he needs to find a teacher and goes on this search. And it ends up that he gets connected to Marpa, who's not a monk. Milarepa wasn't a monk at the time, like that. He meets Marpa, who is married with a son, living, and Marpa is incredibly rough with him. But he somehow connects with Marpa. And when you meet a teacher, you'd bring your most precious jewel of, can I get one Lamrim teaching, he says to Marpa, one teaching. And you know, Marpa's just completely rude and yelling at him. And, you know, what do you want a teaching for? You know, who do you think you are? So basically Marpa says to him, if you build me this tower, and you know the story, if you build the tower, so, you know, I'll give you one. And he builds the tower, and then Marpa, when he's done, comes out and goes, oh, I told you to build the tower there. I made a mistake. It should be over there. So I want you to tear it down and I want you to build it over there. This happens several times. Okay. And this is the day before there was land moving equipment. He did it on his back, carrying rocks, carrying boulders, carrying sand, carrying clay. His back is scraped raw. He's done. He crawls up to the back door one night where they give him a little bit of food, right? And Marpa's wife takes pity on him. His whole back is oozing pus. And she takes pity on him and can't bear it. She puts a balm on his back and kind of wraps it and gives him some extra food like that to kind of help him, to soothe it, right? And she goes back in the house, and then Marpa yells at her and says, great, you've just delayed his enlightenment another 3 years or another 3 lifetimes, okay? Because Marpa sees a qualified disciple. Marpa sees he's got the right kind of disciple that's reached this level. Maybe you've reached your bottom, your dark night of the soul. Maybe you've developed such a strong feeling of renunciation. You're done with worldly stuff. You're done with this life. You got here, good enough. Now you want to take care of future lives. It's a real sign of renunciation. Okay, so Marpa sees him and is like, yeah, I've got somebody now. I've got the clay I can mold and work with. Great. But he realized he's got to be really tough on Milarepa to have him purify all the killing. So after finally all this time, he gives Milarepa the teachings. Milarepa goes off into retreat and becomes enlightened in one lifetime. Very inspiring story. So sometimes these masters would manifest that way. I think it was Marpa's teacher was a Talopa who was fishing, and he caught him frying fish. And here's a Buddhist like catching fish and eating the fish. And so again, this is about not trusting the outer appearances.
I think that was
Our
Naropa who
perceptions
taught
can be
Talopa.
valuable. What's that?
think that was Naropa who caught Talopa frying fish.
Yes. Okay. Naropa caught Talopa. Yes. Thank you. I always get the names mixed up. And so again, are our perceptions perfect? Do you always see everything perfectly accurate and you have the whole story and you know all about why Lama Zopa Rinpoche said that one word to that person that you might have interpreted as a little bit harsh? Well, actually, no, my mind is not enlightened. It's not omniscient. I see Rinpoche as a more highly realized being. You know, I've seen Rinpoche's own experiences with myself when I might have needed a little bit harsher thing that really worked for my mind, even though it was hard to take in the beginning. I've seen that with other students. So again, sometimes a teacher will manifest. However, again, you need to check up and check. Because I've had enough of a history with Lama Zopa Rinpoche and have generated some faith. So if I see anything challenging, I've got much more benefit, I see. And again, Rinpoche going back and saying, why don't you check out the qualities once in a while instead of just criticizing? We get into habits. I've seen this at retreats where a little group forms, a little clique forms. And there, you know, I've seen it at the Kopan course. If you've heard about this, Kopan Monastery, not this year because of the pandemic, but every November they have a month-long course that takes you through slowly the entire Lam Rim through a course of teachings and meditations. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche usually shows up halfway through the course or at the end. He will teach, and there's usually Western monks and nuns teaching the course and leading the meditations. I've led the meditations for that course several times, and I love doing that. And there's like, I don't know, 300, 400 people at the course from all over the world. But what always happens is a little clique forms that wants to take the teacher down. I've seen it every time. You know, not that they purposely want to take the teacher down, but they just get very critical and they don't want to keep the precepts and they keep wandering down the hill when you're told you really shouldn't leave, and they try to get their cell phone and they want to make calls. And I've seen it many times, and it kind of disrupts the more serious people that really want to be in a retreat mode for the course and are really getting a lot out of it. And I've seen them and they ask very provocative questions purposely to kind of try to, you know, get the teacher rattled. And it's really rude. It's not being discerning, it's just rude. And we always say to them, you know, we know that this is a philosophy we're teaching from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Gelugpa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. This isn't for everybody. And if you don't like it, you're free to leave, but not the coming and going. Like either stay here and do it, just commit for the month, which you signed up for in the beginning anyway, you agreed, or you're free to go. It's not like we tell people you can't leave. You can leave, but don't leave and come back and leave and come back, and because it interrupts. So we're very clear about what the course is about. But again, with Rinpoche, when I see things, I just try to go back into, I mean, I'll check, but I've got such a wealth of much more benefit that he's done for my mind, for my practice, for my life. So I tend to try to stay there than just getting into the little pieces. But with other things, I do try to thoroughly check up when something's going on. And I think an organization needs to thoroughly check up, investigate legally. They need to bring indictments or whatever charges that need to happen legally if something is happening. If that's a way to progressively go ahead with something, I think sometimes that may need to happen in certain cultures. That.
I've got, I have Pabonka Rinpoche in Tantric lineage I hold. I know the Dalai Lama does as well. And he, at times I find it a little tricky due to what's happened in England over the last few years. I try and focus on gratitude of receiving the lineage I've received, but it's sometimes a little tricky.
Yes, it can be a little tricky. Part of samsara's nature as well, but keep checking and find a path that you do feel comfortable on. And the other thing is, for those of you that don't have teachers and you want to find a teacher, I'd say first of all, I've given you all the guidelines for that traditionally. The other thing is getting yourself watching videos now. All the teachers have videos. They're all on YouTube. Everybody is on YouTube. So check into some of these videos, read some of their books, do some of the meditations. Then if you can, who are their disciples? Who goes to those teachings? You meet people? They'll go, oh, I study with him. I've heard about her. I do this thing with her. What are the disciples like? Are they good-hearted people? Are they following what the teacher said? Are they doing some things you don't really agree with? So you do need to check out the disciples. When we are allowed to be in person again, go to the teachings in person. Get to teachings you can get to in person. Okay, and if you really want to find some highly qualified beings, I have traveled across the world to visit them when I did not have any money to do so. I've made the effort. If you really want to do it, the air ticket will show up, and get yourself in there in person. Visit them where they live. It creates a much closer bond between you and that teacher if it's somebody that you want to devote to and somebody that you really like. That means a lot to them. Not that they need that, but there's something different about that when you can. Go to some retreats with them. Start with a weekend. How did you like it? Go, I went to the weekend and then he was asking me for a date and I didn't really feel like I wanted to go on for anything longer. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I want to get there as much as possible because I like how it feels in my body and mind. I feel like it changes my cells in a positive way. I can't explain it. It's just a feeling I get when I'm with Rinpoche. My mind turns much more toward virtue and practice, my own experience. So you do need to make some effort on your side. Schedule the retreat with them, make the commitment. Instead of the holiday, you're spending your money to go to that thing. That's how you're gonna find the teacher. Then when you feel a little bit more connected, ask for a little piece of advice that you can follow the advice, and then follow it and do it, put it into practice, and then check. How do you feel? How did it go? Did it feel good? Didn't like it? Try somebody else, okay? But don't keep, without following the advice, keep checking with other people until you get the advice you like. Put some of it into practice and then maybe ask them another question. If you like the result, go back and ask a little deeper question like that.
That's great, thank you. I have had a letter from Lama Zopa, and I received one of his long advice letters, and it's quite fabulous.
So you got your life practice?
I have, yes, from Lama
Great.
Zopa, yes.
And are you following? Are you doing?
I've had a recommended initiation, but I've not had that particular initiation yet, but I would like to at some point in the future. And then he gave me some Lama practices that I am doing.
Great. I'm sure there's many more things he told you to do.
Yeah, yes.
But slowly, you chip away at those practices. You start with something you can actually finish. Like some of it is stuff you're going to finish, and then you finish one, check it off, and you go to the next thing, and you slowly, and some things you're doing every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Perfect. And it's going to slowly unfold deeper and deeper, more and more, it'll start coming together.
I wrote to him and I didn't get a reply for about a year, and I still got this email through, and there was pages of it, and I was really sort of overwhelmed by his kindness of taking the time to write all this and send it to me, and I was something I read regularly.
That's great, because a lot of it, as I said, is standardized. So it is, but then there's certain parts that were checked just for you. Yeah, absolutely, that are just for you. But a lot of it can be standardized because it is similar of how we're going to meditate on the Lamrim and things like that. So that's great. You're on your way.
Thank you.
So is there any last thing, because we are out of time at this point, anything that we missed or you're still confused about or needing to know? Okay, I think we are. I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope it's certainly given you a great overview of the teacher, the spiritual teacher. I would like to do some dedications, and I'm going to share my screen to do some of these COVID dedications Rinpoche's recommended. And I really want to thank Stuart and June and the Compassion Center, your study group. Let me just bring these up, for all the supporting and hosting and for making this possible. You guys do a tremendous amount of work, and I'm really grateful. And I'm so hoping that we can see each other in person soon. Would be wonderful. And I also wish all of you great health and to be safe and healthy. And for some people needing additional healing right now, Peter K., dying of pancreatic cancer in Vermont. Kathleen Raffat is recovering from serious cancer surgery in San Diego. My cousin Cindy Finfrock, recovering from serious surgery from stage 4 colon cancer in my area. Norma Harris in my area with being treated for stage 4 colon cancer, and all the other beings with COVID. And for our president, Donald Trump, and his family and the people that got infected with him, may their diseases be finished quickly like that. And may he be able to just sail off in another role in January and be happy with his life like that. But for all the beings that have COVID, may they be healed immediately. May the disease disappear from the planet immediately and all other diseases. And may we be able to progress along this path to get enlightened quickly so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings. So feel free if you'd like to join. Let me find his dedication prayers. Okay, can you see those? Great, I'm going to make them a little bigger. Thank you. May the precious supreme bodhicitta, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sicknesses. May all the sicknesses without exception of transmigratory beings never occur again. In all my lives never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. By the force of the victorious one, Tsongkhapa, acting as our direct Maya and a virtuous friend in all our lives, may we never turn away for even a second from the pure path highly admired by the victorious ones. Like the earth, water, fire, and wind, medicines, and monastery firewood, may it always be enjoyed by all sentient beings as they like and without resistance. May I cherish all sentient beings like my own life. May I cherish them much more than myself. May all their negative karma ripen on me, and may all my virtue ripen on them. Let's do this emptiness one. Very important dedication. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, the numberless Buddhas, and the numberless sentient beings, which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that state which is completely empty of existing from its own side by myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. I'm just going to do this last page. The wish granting, wish fulfilling, I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praise is the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times in order to have good conduct. And for the long life of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, the wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind and Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the 3 sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And before we go, thank you so much again. I thought I'll just put my website, and there is information if you are interested in the Laudo pilgrimage. And if you're interested in the New York course, all of the courses I teach are on there with links, so you can sign up. Some of them need you to register in advance to, so you can get the Zoom code and things like that. And You can find most everything at amymiller.com. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you, Stuart and June, and all the rest of you. I wish you all the best, and I hope I really wish you the best with your relationship with your teacher, finding always qualified teachers, meeting them early in life, in every life, so that you have an authentic path to enlightenment as quickly as possible, because all these living beings really need our help. Like that.
And Amy, on behalf of the group, can I say thank you so much for these 4 weeks of teachings. This is the second time you've taught us this year, so we're very privileged to have you twice. And it's felt like you've been with us for 4 weeks this time, which has been amazing. Of course, you're not here in Liverpool, so we haven't had the chance to show you more things about the Beatles. So you must come when you can, because there's so much more to show you.
I can't wait.
In fact, there's an exhibition on at the moment of Linda McCartney's photographs, which is astonishing. It'll be gone very soon,
Right.
but it's a shame you haven't been able to see that. But thank you. We would, of course, love you to teach again in the future, in person or online.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Please take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, then, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Stuart.
Everyone.
Thank you, Stuart. Also.
Thank you, Van Amy.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Van Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Van Amy.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Van Amy. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
See you, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye.